thank you for recording. I almost forgot. I'm going to start, before we kick us off, I'm going to start with a couple of instructions. If you would like to use the AI translation, you can do so by scanning the QR code that you're seeing on the screen, or by using the link that I'm going to paste in the chat as soon as I find the chat. Okay, here's the chat. And I'm going to send you the link where you can follow our webinar through other languages. Y si hay alguien que es hispanohablante, me puede escribir directamente y le puedo ayudar con el sistema de traducción. If anyone is having trouble using the AI translation services, I can also support you. You can just send me a direct message, and I'll be happy to help you with it. And first, I would like to introduce you to our NURHT co-chairs who are present and are going to be moderating this session. First, I'd like to start introducing Julie Heinzen. She's a Senior Program Officer at the Injectable Access Collaborative Project, where she has supported ministries of health and implementing partners with a range of technical assistance support to integrate DMPA-SC, including self-injection as a self-care method, into national family planning programs. We also have Megan Christofield, who is a technical advisor at GPIGO, where she provides family planning technical assistance and serves as a global technical lead for self-care. Megan specializes in supporting teams through product introduction and scale-up, uses systematic advocacy approaches and application of design thinking. Julie is going to kick us off with some opening remarks, and after we have our two presentations, Megan is going to moderate the Q&A and wrap the meeting up with some closing remarks. Over to you, Julie.
Thank you so much, Reina, and hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. The new and underutilized Reproductive Health Technologies Caucus, what we like to call the NURHT Caucus, works to expand the supply of new and under-accessible sexual and reproductive health technologies through the public, private, and social marketing sectors to improve equity and meet people's needs. As part of that, we aim to facilitate information sharing about products, challenges, and lessons learned from product introduction to scale up and more. Today, we're going to be exploring a little bit earlier in the timeline, looking at new contraceptive products that are in development. Our hope is that at least some of these products will make it to market, and we'll hopefully be able to leverage some of the learnings that have been generated from NURHT Caucus members on how to best introduce new products in the future. Products in the pipeline are a particularly exciting topic for me because each represents the potential to meet the needs of someone who just hasn't quite found the best method for them or to reach an entirely new user. So today, we'll open with the landscape of contraceptive research and development, here seeing some data from the Contraceptive Technology Innovation Exchange. The CTI Exchange tracker reports on contraceptive programs in the discovery, preclinical, and clinical stages of development, and products approved in one country with the potential for additional regulatory approvals. Emily will orient us to where male contraception sits within this framework and share her observations of the current state and challenges facing contraceptive research and development broadly. Then we'll hear from the Male Contraceptive Initiative. The MCI team will provide an overview of male contraception, the different mechanisms of male contraceptives and products that are closest to being introduced to the market, and how we can advocate for this promising research field to become a widely available option. I'm really looking forward to these presentations, so I'm not going to take much time. I'll just reiterate to please feel free to ask your questions in the chat as you listen to the presentations for our Q&A session that will happen at the end of both presentations. And I'll turn it back over to you, Reina, to introduce our first speaker.
Thank you so much, Julie, for these words. I am going to start introducing our first speaker, who is Emily Hopes. Emily is a technical advisor in the Contraceptive Research, Development, and Introduction Division at FHI 360, where she focuses on research utilization and knowledge exchange by convening cross-disciplinary stakeholders to advance evidence-based practices. She serves as the managing editor for the Contraceptive Technology Innovation Exchange, or CTI Exchange, which is a platform designed to grow the global contraceptive research and development ecosystem through collaboration and knowledge sharing. I'm going to hand it over to you, Emily, and your presentation.
Thank you so much for that introduction and for the opportunity to talk today. I'm really excited to talk about the contraceptive development pipeline and some of the things we've been doing to update our pipeline database. So as was mentioned, I am the managing editor of the Contraceptive Technology Innovation Exchange. And on that website, we have a pipeline database. And today I'll be presenting findings from some work we've done recently to try to understand the current state of the contraceptive product pipeline and how it's evolved over the past few years. So the CTI Exchange has always kept a database of products under development, but last year we conducted a very thorough review of each product and did a major search of the literature to identify new products being developed. And this was all managed in large part by my colleague, Audrey Freitas, and was also guided by a panel of contraceptive R&D experts, many of whom are on this webinar today, including several people from the Male Contraceptive Initiative. We also just had a preprint published this morning that sort of outlines this work that we've been doing. And so I will put a link to that in the chat if you would like to take a look at that. Next slide. So our end product after this intensive review process is the Contraceptive Technology Innovation Tracker, which is pictured and linked here. And I will also include a link in the chat to that. I would actually encourage you all to follow this link right now and follow along in the tracker with me as I'm presenting today. I think that will be a really exciting and interesting way to do this presentation. So I've just included the link in the chat, and if you'd like to follow along, that would be great. As you can see, you can easily search the database using keywords, or you can filter based on a number of different characteristics like user type, development stage, and delivery type. You'll also see at the top that you can view active and inactive products. So we've made the decision to include an archive of products that are no longer in development, and those are labeled as inactive. For today's webinar, if you'd like to follow along, I'd suggest selecting male as the user type and then hitting apply filter, and then view only the active products using the menu at the very top. And then you'll get the right products that we'll be discussing today. Next slide. So this is a high-level overview of all of the active products in the current iteration of this database. Active means that we've identified some kind of credible evidence of active development or material support for development in the past 5 calendar years using only publicly available materials. Currently, there are 123 active contraceptive leads or products under development. On the right of the slide, you can see what stage of development those are in. The largest proportion are in preclinical development at 47%, followed by clinical development at 29%, early development at 19%, and then there are 6 products that we've included in the database that have regulatory approval, but only in 1 country. And this distribution really underscores how long and resource intensive the preclinical phase can be, which includes extensive in vitro and in vivo testing to establish safety and efficacy. So a lot of products sort of stay in that phase for a long time. And then if you look at the left side of the slide, you can see the distribution of male versus female and hormonal versus non-hormonal methods being developed. So 89 methods are female with a fairly even distribution between hormonal and non-hormonal methods. And then we've identified 29 male methods, which is about 24% of all active products. And you can see that this is much more skewed towards non-hormonal methods. Next slide. And according to our data, this is a shift that's happened in recent years. The last time we did a thorough review of our database was in 2018, so about 7 years ago. And at that time, the split was closer to 50-50. So that's a really interesting shift that sort of happened in the male space recently. Next slide. So now I'd like to take a bit of a closer look at the male contraceptive pipeline. From this diagram, you can see clearly the trends that were laid out in the previous slide. So there's a very small number of hormonal products, and they're all in clinical development, and that's at the bottom of the slide. And then at the top of the slide, there's a larger proportion of hormonal products, non-hormonal products, and the majority of these are in preclinical development. You can see a long list under preclinical development. Next slide. So if we zoom in further and look at the hormonal methods that are reaching clinical development, here are a few more details about those methods. And I'm not going to talk through specific methods here because Heather and Logan will do that in their presentation, but I did want to sort of provide a snapshot. I also wanted to point out the caveats at the bottom of the slide. So the first product listed here has reached phase 1 trials, but could be moving to sort of our inactive or archive soon because there's been no publicly available information since 2020. And then the second product listed did reach phase 1 trial, but returned to non-clinical evaluation a few years ago. And I think I wanted to provide these caveats in this snapshot because it underscores both the complexity of compiling a database like this, trying to sort of fit things into neat little boxes when they really don't fit into boxes. And it also shows the complexity of contraceptive development overall. Things move back and forth between stages and between developers, funding is lost and things stall, and this type of research just takes a lot of time. Next slide. And then here's the snapshot of the non-hormonal methods in clinical development. And like I said, Logan and Heather will go into more detail about a few of these, but you may recognize some of these that have been sort of in the news or on your social media feed lately, like ADAM, Plan A, the oral contraceptive pill, which have all hit really significant milestones recently. So that's very exciting. Next slide. And then the final analysis that we did that I'd like to sort of present here is one where we looked at which stage of development products started in the 2018 version of our database and where they are now. So in other words, how much progress have we made in the past 7 years in contraceptive R&D? And this diagram shows the progress is actually pretty slow, but there's still progress happening. So that's encouraging. So during this period, 3 methods advanced from early or preclinical stages into clinical trials. 2 moved from phase 1 trials to later stage trials like phase 3 or phase 4. And then only 1 method reached the market during that time. Next. But if we look at specifics, the male methods have comparatively fared pretty well over this course. The 2 products that have moved from early stages to phase 1 clinical trials are both male methods, which are listed here. Next. And then ADAM is the only product that we saw move from preclinical to phase 1 clinical trials. Next slide. So these are my conclusions. As we've worked through this process of compiling an up-to-date database, we've really learned a lot about the state of contraceptive R&D overall. One of the key challenges in contraceptive R&D is the high rate of attrition. So among the products that became inactive during that time, nearly a third stalled out in early development, another 28% in preclinical stages, and 42% during clinical trials. And this reflects just how difficult it is to move a product all the way through the full pipeline. And then additionally, we found that 27 products changed hands, either switching developers or teams, or sort of changing the makeup of the team working on it during the review period, which is often very necessary to bring on new partners, but it does indicate a certain level of volatility in the field. And then we're also seeing a notable shift in who's sort of driving contraceptive innovation. As many of you know, large for-profit companies have basically stepped back altogether from contraceptive R&D. And recently, we've seen an increase in sort of smaller reproductive health startups that are stepping into this space and driving innovation. And then chronic underinvestment, as well as scientific and regulatory complexity in contraceptive R&D, continues to be a barrier. And if you're sort of interested in the makeup of the funding in this space, I would suggest looking at a report put out by Impact Global Health called the G-Finder report that breaks down the funding in the space and actually shows that funding is decreasing in contraceptive R&D when it really needs to be increasing in order to get the method mix that we'd like. Next slide. So that's all from me. I would encourage you to visit the CTI Exchange and the CTI tracker. We don't just have the tracker, we also post news, events, and opportunities in the contraceptive R&D space. We have a LinkedIn page that's here, and we're actually highlighting one product from the database every day this week in the lead up to World Contraception Day, so take a look there. And then we also have a newsletter that goes out each week called the Flash in 5 that highlights 5 key things happening in contraceptive R&D each week. And we're sending it out today. It hasn't gone out yet, so you can feel free to subscribe to get today's issue. Thanks so much for this opportunity, and I look forward to MCI's presentation.
Thank you so much, Emily. And let me unspotlight. Okay. Perfect. Before we continue, I would like to let you know that you can put your questions in the chat, and as we move along, and we'll make sure to get to Megan when the time to Q&A, when we have time for the Q&A. Just let me. Okay. Now I'm going to present our next presenters, introduce them. I'm going to start with Heather. Heather Vadat is the Executive Director of the Male Contraceptive Initiative, MCI, where she leads efforts to advance innovative contraceptive solutions that prioritize global equity, access, and inclusion. With nearly 2 decades of experience across nonprofit and global health sectors, Heather has spearheaded strategies to expand the contraceptive method mix through investment in novel contraceptive technologies. I'm also going to introduce Logan Nichols. Dr. Logan Nichols is the Chief Research Officer at the Male Contraceptive Initiative, where he is responsible for a research portfolio of over $15 million in scientific funding that includes grants in philanthropy and philanthropic investments towards the research and development of novel male contraceptive drugs and devices. Logan is also the Chief Scientific Officer at Contraceptive Accelerator Network, a mission-driven subsidiary of NCI that aims to directly develop novel contraceptive methods. And I'm going to hand it over to Heather to start their presentation.
Thanks, Freyna, and thank you all for having us. We were just talking before the webinar started about how excited we are to be here. We've really had on our radar, our team's been together for about 7 years now, and really we're looking forward to the day when the pipeline was far enough along to actually be having this moment. So we appreciate you all being here and taking a minute to hear about the exciting work in our space. And thanks, Emily, for your great overview of the pipeline as well. It's a great way to get us started. So I will be brief through just an initial introduction of MCI more broadly, and then I'll hand it over to Logan to go a little bit more in depth into the product pipeline. Next slide, please. So MCI has been around since 2014 and actively grant making since 2017. In that time, being a smaller organization, we've had the actual honor of being able to interact very closely with the community and spent a lot of time just asking what was needed. And in that process, we've sort of established ourselves as the hub and ecosystem facilitator for the non-hormonal reversible male contraceptive space. So we are constantly striving to engage developers and funders, the public, future users, other partners, trying to make those connections. So we really try our best to maximize the minimal resources we all have from a funding perspective, but we have a lot of power as a community in knowledge and passion. So that is one of the best parts of what we do. Next slide, please. So we really can break this down into two main approaches. So we provide funding and support for research and development. We have a grant-making portfolio that puts out about $1.5 million a year, roughly. And on top of that, we have opportunities for fellowships, trainee support. So there are supplemental sides to this as well. So as much as supporting the new and emerging research, and the maturing research at this point, which is kind of fun to be able to say, with groups like Your Choice and Contraline and others. We also are trying to invest in the next generation of research to keep all of the effort in making this momentum and progress backfilled with the great minds that are emerging and excited about this field as well. On the other side, we do a lot of advocacy for male contraception. That word, I have learned over time, means different things to different people. When we first started, we threw around the term advocacy all the time because really it was about making the connections between the public and really trying to address those dogged misperceptions that men aren't interested, women won't trust them. So we were doing that just by talking early on. So we really thought more about public advocacy, and that has now, of course, over time grown into more proper policy advocacy. We have some amazing partners that we're working with, particularly in Europe around this. And there's a lot of activity that's really blossoming out of those efforts. So in the middle, we hope to find that impact. So we want to not just support the science, but we want to make sure that the environment around the emerging science is ready and everybody's going to take off and roll at the same time. Next slide, please. One of the big things that has been so helpful for us is really getting a snapshot of the global demand for male contraception. As I just alluded to, the misperceptions about interest and trust and the market actually have been problematic for years. And a couple years ago, some colleagues were able to develop a really great multi-country survey that was supported by the Gates Foundation and MCI. And we have this amazing data set now, and there's still more data coming out of it. So keep in tune. But really, you can see here, as much as 76% of the men surveyed in this global health, this global demand survey, were indicating they'd be willing to use a new product within the first 12 months that it was on the market. And then as you go up over time, you see as much as 98%. A lot of this is attributed to a standard just introduction curve. So you have your early adopters, but it's also a reflection of the latent demand that we have been needing to uncover. There were also, I don't know if you guys can hear, there's a train going by, sorry about that. We also were able to dig into the female trust factor in these studies and found 50 to 86% of women said that they would trust their partner. 2 other points, obviously, we want to make sure that this isn't an either or conversation. I feel like I'm preaching to the choir on this, but it's worth noting. So there's trust, there's demand and interest among the men, but we're not talking about either or. There's also this opportunity for both partners to be able to use a method in the future, which, you know, increases the protection and offers autonomy more broadly. So that's a very exciting element. One other note is that this team was able to field this survey pre and post Dobbs, and we saw a marked increase in the number of men who expressed interest in male contraception within 12 months of being on the market post Dobbs. That jumped, if I remember right, from the 39% here and then up to 49%. Next slide, please. So this is where I'm going to transition to Logan, but really the status of male contraceptive development. Emily gave a great high-level overview. We're still in early stages. We have a lot of good work in preclinical, but there's also some big wins with our folks that are in clinical. Again, shout out to Contraline and Your Choice, and then some folks that are really moving quickly towards that, like Next with Plan A and the SACEL team, among others. We've really made advancements in understanding the biology around male reproduction. And there's all sorts of advancements that have come with computational modeling, drug screening efforts, all the high throughput screening options, MedChem. I mean, every time I'm on a call with someone on our team, I'm like on this tremendous growth spike. So, and then of course the clinical advances with the recently completed phase 2b study of the hormonal gel, the NEST program. Just a quick note that not only the science and the clinical findings of that, but the actual user experience out of that program has been remarkable. So we've had the opportunity to interview and showcase a lot of participants from that study. And I just really want to take a moment to give a shout out to that team globally, because those participants every time don't just call out the fact that many of them are not being dramatic, devastated to have to come off these methods. And their stories abound for why. And we have lots of information on that we can share. But they always, without fail, talk about their experience on the trial and how they felt so cared for and engaged with the folks running the trial. So I just think that's remarkable. So I'll now quit my waxing on about things, and I'll hand it over to Logan to dig into the pipeline a bit more.
Great. Thanks, Heather. Really appreciate it. Let's see. So before I move on from this slide, I think the way I'll wrap it up here is to really throw back to Emily's presentation and show that, there were some advances in the male contraceptive space where things are moving along with program to program. And I think that this slide really highlights that this is really an exciting time in the male contraceptive space. We've got these clinical advances. We have a number of preclinical programs close behind them trying to advance into the clinical stage. And I think that this really is some of the most movement that we've seen in the male contraceptive space thus far. So to get into some of those programs and talk about some of those products and maybe what is coming down the pipeline, we can go to the next slide, and I'll give you a little bit of a baseline understanding of just how male contraception generally works. There's a few different flavors and a few different mechanisms of action. So to really get into it, I like to break it down into these three buckets. The first of which is you stop spermatogenesis, right? The generation of new sperm. When you do that, there's a time for onset and a time for return to fertility. So that is to say that you have to take a drug or use an API for some amount of time before the contraceptive action occurs. It's usually in the order of months, let's call it 2 months or so, but this can vary depending on where in spermatogenesis you actually inhibit the cycle. This includes hormonal methods operate via a spermatogenic mechanism of action. Some non-hormonal methods do as well. I'll get into some of the flavors as we get moving. We can also impact sperm transport. So you can think about a vasectomy, right? It prevents the transport of sperm through the vas deferens. This is another way that you can do that, except rather than with a vasectomy and where the vas deferens is cut and ligated or otherwise blocked off, there's an injection of a hydrogel into the vas deferens that blocks sperm transport. There are also possibilities of drug-based approaches that maybe prevent ejaculation or prevent movement of sperm transport. These are comparatively earlier in development than the device-based approaches. But regardless, point is that this mechanism of action prevents sperm from actually ejaculating or ejecting from the reproductive tract. The last mechanism is sperm function. So that is to say that after sperm are ejaculated, they have a variety of things that take place before they can fertilize an egg. This mechanism is kind of resulting in all of those. So that would be inhibiting sperm motility, sperm egg fusion, different pieces of the puzzle downstream outside of the male body. But at the same time, This is really exciting sector because you could, in theory, dose men with a drug and have a contraceptive effect that affects sperm function, or you could dose a female partner with the same sort of drug and have the same sort of mechanism of action. This is a possibility that is still, there's still a lot to determine in terms of sperm function. It's a difficult sector to say that how far down do you need to turn sperm function to have a contraceptive effect? Does it have to be 0% or 10%, or we're not quite sure exactly what the thresholds are. But at the same time, this is exciting for another reason, because you could develop, in theory, on-demand contraceptives that inhibit sperm function. This is something that would be dosed 30 minutes, 15 minutes, an hour before sex, something in that range, and provide a contraceptive profile that men don't have at this point, that really doesn't exist outside of condoms, right? Condoms would be an on-demand method, but a pharmaceutical on-demand method would be something completely new. So with those mechanisms in mind, we can move on to the next slide. And I'll talk about some of the products very specifically in development. I also like to break these into three kind of big buckets. The first of which is hormonal methods that operate via that spermatogenic mechanism of action. And then there's also reversible vasectomies. That's what I mentioned via the vis-a-vis the medical devices. I'll get into some of those specifics. And then I like to break it into a big bucket of non-hormonal contraceptives. These can have wide mechanisms of action, hundreds of possible targets. The products can have a wide range of profiles. It's a very open area, but it's also a very nascent area compared to hormonal contraception or the hydrogel medical device field. But let's get into some of those specific topics. Next slide, please. So the hormonal products in development, Emily touched on them. I'll give you a little more detail. The main product that's furthest along in clinical trials right now is Nesterone testosterone. It's a once daily gel, men rub it on their shoulders. It's in phase 2B, moving into phase 3 clinical trials very soon. And it's sponsored by the Population Council and NIH. So it's also been licensed by, and I believe they just activated that by Contraline, which is a startup company that also has another product, Atom, that we'll talk about in a moment. It's furthest along in clinical trials. Heather mentioned the exciting things that have come out of those clinical trials, people's excitement for the product itself. I think that's been some of the really great things that have come out of this, not to mention the fact that it's paving a regulatory process. It's really going through some of the first stages of understanding what it will take to get a male contraceptive to market, and we're learning a lot of lessons along the way. So just to say that this is a really important product and something that could be one of the first things to market. Additional hormonal products that are in development are an injectable and a daily oral pill. Emily touched on both of those as well. Just to say that those are comparatively earlier in clinical studies, but they are being evaluated in a clinical setting. The thing that I really like about this, the Population Council and NIH, how they've structured this is generating a slate of products that have very different product profiles, right? We have a gel, a pill, an injectable, and we know from the market research that Heather alluded to that form is one of the most important characteristics when it comes to choosing a contraceptive. And so I just really like that this has been pushed forward in such in a way that you have multiple product forms that can achieve market saturation, and if not market saturation, appeal to a wide variety of users. Next slide, please. This is the hydrogels that I mentioned. So I mentioned Atom by Contraline. They are in clinical studies now, moving towards a pivotal trial. I briefly touched on it, but again, the way that these products work is an injection of a hydrogel into the vas deferens of men. Atom in particular, these are both intended to be reversible, but Atom in particular reverses over a time course. So it's intended to degrade after a couple of years, whereas Plan A, it's another method in development, is comparatively earlier. They're in the preclinical stage. That product is intended to last for years, potentially 10 or more, but be reversed upon a second injection. So another procedure would go into reverse, and in theory, that would restore fertility. It's in preclinical studies. Adam is in clinical studies, but just to say that they are progressing well. I see a comment in the chat. I'll briefly address it. Any early insights on effectiveness and side effects for male contraceptives? We're learning a lot about them from the early clinical studies. And just to say that they're different depending on the approach. Non-hormonal contraceptives are going to have some level of side effect, but they, in theory, can be more targeted than hormonal contraceptives. Hormonal contraceptives, though, are going to have, at least so far, an acceptable safety profile, at least to the users that have gone through the clinical trials. Next slide, please. Another product that Emily alluded to that's in clinical studies, this one is moving into phase 2 very soon. This is a daily oral pill, YCT529. It's a non-hormonal pill that prevents sperm cell development. It is a daily oral, and it's under development by a startup called Your Choice Pharmaceuticals, or Therapeutics, I believe, excuse me. They are moving forward into phase 2 and really represent the forefront of the non-hormonal pharmaceutical space. Very exciting that they're pushing forward. In the interest of time, I'm going to accelerate a little bit. We can go to the next slide. Another interesting method, this one is particularly compelling for a few reasons, is thermal male contraceptives. So thermal male contraception, this is a known piece of biology that if you heat up the testicles, they slow down and eventually stop spermatogenesis. And this does not require excessive heating. This can be heat that's actually aligned with like basal body temperature. So the testes, right, they hang down in the scrotum away from the body in order to stay cool. If you lift them up into the inguinal canal, which is a structure in the body, right, so that the testes can be pushed upwards into, they heat up and eventually stop spermatogenesis. So people have leveraged this to try and create a contraceptive method by creating rings or underwear or various devices that can heat the testis and cause a contraceptive effect. It's very interesting for a few reasons to me, one of which is the idea of like DIY health. It's getting more and more popular. I think that's something not to be ignored in the public. But further than that, I think this is very interesting because it's a very accessible and cheap method. However, on the other hand, I will say that we don't know much about them. The safety, efficacy, and reversibility has been unproven. They have not gone through clinical studies yet, even though there are users out there DIYing their own health. So just to say that it's a compelling method and very exciting to understand exactly what it could result in, but there's a lot unknown before it can be recommended for use. Next slide, please. The last pill that I'll talk about, or at least the last approach, is a on-demand pill. And this one's in the preclinical stage. They have not yet entered human studies. They're optimizing the drug right now, but it's very exciting because this is really, like I said, what could result in a unique product profile that men haven't seen before, an on-demand method. This method prevents sperm from swimming, right? Prevents their motility. If we were to click on this video, I don't think it's going to work here, but you would see that the vehicle control on the left side would be flopping around and swimming, and the tail would be moving around in the way that you would expect sperm to be vigorously motile. And then on the right-hand side, they've added this inhibitor, and you would see little twitching at best. And that's how this mechanism works, is it prevents sperm from swimming up through the reproductive tract and fertilizing an egg. These guys are optimizing, again, the timing and potency, but they're also developing a female contraceptive based on the same mechanism. So that is to say they'll try and attack this from two different sides and create new contraceptive options for everyone. So I think that's really exciting. I think that's really great for men. I think that's really great for women. I think that's really great for the contraceptive field at large, for us to be thinking about new product profiles that can provide new options to more people. Yeah. So with that, I'll wrap up the products that I think I was introducing, and we can move to the next slide. And I'll pitch it back to Heather. Thanks.
Thanks, Logan. So I'll just wrap up really quickly here so we can get to the Q&A, but just to say, we're really excited, as I said, to explore collaborative opportunities with RHSC. So we'll obviously continue to keep you all apprised of the pipeline. And please feel free to reach out to any of us. I think the slides are going to be shared, and we have a very hard to crack secret code for our email addresses, which is just our first name and malecontraceptive.org. So Heather at malecontraceptive.org, Logan at malecontraceptive.org. We're also looking at opportunities for joint advocacy efforts through the AAWG. We are looking to talk to manufacturers around opportunities for regional hubs for manufacturing, and how we can make connections with grantees so that they can understand what sort of opportunities are present in countries around the world, and really looking at that for the common interest of access, affordability, all of those things. And we are looking to continue to share advocacy messages to address myths and misperceptions. I'm switching my bullets around here a little bit because I realized I should have put this on here. One of our big efforts that we've done this year is we've engaged a committee of experts to help elucidate the regulatory pathway for male contraceptives. And it has been an amazing experience. This group has really given it their all. And right now, those recommendations are up for public comment. And I want to take a minute to give a plug for a couple things around that. One, please take a moment and look through them and provide your comments. And I'll put this in the chat here. You don't need to feel obligated to read and comment on the whole thing. I will tell you it's large. But sections, any feedback you can provide, and you may not think that you have, something immediately to contribute, but if you think about how you can extrapolate from experiences you've had in the product development process, those sorts of insights are extremely valuable. And I feel like this is really a unique opportunity to shape how these recommendations work in the basic absence of any sort of guidance right now. So that's one thing, is please provide your comments. Please share it widely. We're really, really interested in trying to get input from regulators specifically. So if you have regulatory authorities that you've engaged with, if you wouldn't mind sharing it with them just to see if they'd be interested. We're also happy to take just direct feedback if that's better than the forum format here. I also wanted to say that we are getting ready to travel. We'll be at FIGO in South Africa and also in Zambia for the Farm Africa conference there. So for any of our colleagues on the call that will be there, please reach out to us. We're looking to meet with people and just want to talk and hear about, how we can advocate for making the best pathway forward for global access to these products, the classics starting with the end in mind. And then we will also be in Argentina in November for the World Vasectomy Day activities, and we'll be having meetings there. So really, we're just looking to meet, talk, and listen. So I wanted to throw those out there as opportunities. And I think that was our last slide. Raina, is that it? Thank you all so much.
Thank you so
Congratulations.
much. Thank you so much, Heather, for your presentation. It was very interesting. And as she mentioned, we are going to be sharing the slides with the attendants and to everybody that registered to the webinar as with the recording too. And now I'm going to hand it over to Megan to start with the Q&A. And we do have one question in the chat, so I'm just going to hand it over to Megan.
Great. Yeah, thanks so much, Heather and Logan and Emily, for the two presentations, which I think helped us understand kind of what does R&D look like from a pipeline perspective? How does male contraception fit into that? And then where are we with some of these exciting developments on the male contraception side? I learned a lot. I'm sure others did as well. I'll just remind folks, go ahead and drop some of your questions in the chat and we'll work through some of them. And there may also be a chance to put your hand up if you are not in a good place to type. So I'll start with a question from Aslam from Pakistan. He's based, and he's sort of wondering about how we market and register some products to the government. So I know we're not quite there yet, but I wonder if we can even step back a little bit, and maybe the question for now even could be, how are we generating interest, right? Because it sounds like one of the big challenges on the development side is really establishing that there is demand. These are products that are worthwhile for developers to invest in, for funders to invest in. So would love to hear if particularly on the MCI side, but I know, Emily, you might have kind of lessons across male and female contraception. What does it take to really kind of generate the interest that gives these investors the kind of momentum to keep going? Do you have any tips for us or resources?
I can take a first stab at this, and Aslam, I put a note in there. Thank you for thinking of this, and please reach out. This is exactly the sort of conversations we'd love to have. Really, so the market research, again, I can't emphasize enough how helpful that has been. And we need to expand on it, right? I mean, so we're looking at how we can leverage funding in Europe, for instance. So to be able to make the case for bilateral investment, as we all know, those programs exist, but we also would need to demonstrate that there's a market in Europe for it, for instance. So trying to raise funds for that. Market research is critical, but it also doesn't fall into our traditional grant schemes for a lot of us. It's a lot of science focus, but we also need to really recognize how the science really can be supported by that market research. I think the other thing is, it sounds very simple, but just talking to people. I mean, when we went to Zambia last year, we had the most amazing series of meetings. And I feel like Steve Kretschmer always talks about the latent demand. And I mean, I know this sounds, so it's just everywhere. So we always joke at MCI, you get into a taxi and someone asks you what you do for a living, and it triggers a conversation. So I really think the demand is there. It's up to us as the community that really believes in these products and the impact that they can have to gather the information we need to really convince the investors. I think there's all sorts of factors that play into this, right? Like there's the latent demand, but there's also a generational jump that I think needs to be acknowledged. I think young people today really expect that there will be a broad offering of contraceptive products. So I think just we all know how to promote these methods, and I think sharing information and leveraging our resources, it's more challenging than ever right now, but I think that's what motivates us, is to sort of power through these kinds of things. So that's sort of a general answer, but we are starting to explore how we can do country level introductions, modeling some other experiences that have happened in the contraceptive space. So we're looking at not just parallel introduction, but like multi-pronged introduction efforts. Stop there.
I guess I'd add to what Heather said about just talking to people and making sure that we're talking to groups of people in the right spaces. So the Contraceptive Technology Innovation Exchange is about bringing researchers together to talk to one another. But I think that kind of trickles down once researchers talk to one another and they talk about all the stakeholders that they need to reach, and they are excited about the research and share that with one another. Then we do webinars like this, or we reach out on LinkedIn, or we create resources, and that trickles down to clinicians and people implementing family planning resources. And then hopefully that also trickles down to the clients as well. And so I think just creating sort of the right resources and the right messages for different audiences is really important. We try to do that with the CTI Exchange as much as we can, and MCI is also really, really good at that.
Yeah. And I think these are great kind of perspectives, and on Fitzer also added sort of a comment that's related to this, sort of really trying to figure out how do we help amplify some of what I think is so clear from you, Heather, in the way that you talk about your personal experiences hearing these things and what those stories are telling you, what they're teaching you as MCI, and how you've been able to kind of relay those messages forward. And maybe part of the question is, it's for you, but it's also back to the RHSC membership to say, what can we do? Like, are there stories we can help you take? Can we help you strategize around how to get those in front of the right people? You've already, indicated some of the interest, the bodies you're interested in getting them in front of, but I wonder if it's even just sort of like an exercise of packaging and putting some of this forward, because I think, debunking some of these myths about interest is probably, one of the biggest bottlenecks we could start unlocking. So I'm curious, anyway, if you guys have anything more on that you want to say.
Yeah, and thank you for that. The truth is we are a small team, and so what
Yeah.
we've always said is reach out to us. And
Okay.
we have, if we could document the gains that we've made just through partnerships with students, we've had so many opportunities for students to take activities and run with them, like developing briefs, trying to help us, have those extra hands. But it's really, we have found that when we have a conversation like this, the folks that sort of are most interested and engaged and passionate about making this a reality become our best allies. And we can't be everywhere, so we're really keen to find proxies that can be expert advocates that work with MCI. So we really view this as a team effort. So
Good.
it sounds hokey, but join us. Join us.
No, I love it. It's a great invitation. Awesome. Okay, I'm going to move to the next question. And actually, Innocent, I'm just going to have you come off mute because I think there's like some richness to what you've put in the chat. If you just want to kind of say your point here, your question.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Megan. I really enjoyed the presentation today. I was listening this morning, but I just remembered we are running the Contraceptive Conversation Facebook page in Tanzania. And what's more interesting, I mean, you expect to have more women asking questions for the kind of conversation that are happening now, but normally we also have men asking questions about the side effects that have been experienced by their partners. And then at some point they're like really serious regarding issues being raised. Like somebody said, I want to take a knife and remove an implant from my wife's arm because I don't like it. And I remember the nature of these conversations happening. We're like, what if could be you taking the contraceptive? And they're like, no, I'm not sure if I would allow my arm to be tiered and insert something there. But really, I was a little bit curious to see if there have been any kind of norms analysis, especially around men and taking contraceptives. And yeah, just curious to see how we could take that kind of conversation in terms of men readiness to take the contraceptives and yeah, with those dynamics, those conversations.
I can take a first swing at this. So just to say, I don't think there's a lot of research going on around men and contraception in general. You know, the norms, their uses, their interests, right? The products don't exist yet, and so I think that there's also a focus away from men in a lot of places, in a lot of spaces. So I think that men are an underserved group when it comes to research on their reproductive health and their attitudes, their motivations, things like that. But I will say that we totally hear that all the time of men asking details about their partners' side effects, what they experience, and trying to ask, like, maybe I could jump in on this. And that's a primary motivator, actually, that has come up in the hormonal male contraceptive trials. So many people are saying, I'm doing this because my partner experiences these side effects. They have methods that don't work for them. Maybe I can take on this burden. And I think that that's really important to say that we see a lot of men coming at this from this empathetic, supportive perspective, right? That's a primary motivator for a lot of men.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And I
Go
think it's
for
an
it.
opportunity to build on. No, I was saying I think it's an opportunity to build on these conversations as we move forward with. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, and I almost wish we had more time because I know there's a lot of folks on this webinar who have joined it who actually have like kind of deep background in this. Dominic, I'm looking at you. You're on the call, and Dominic's does incredible work talking about men and family planning and reproductive health and just male engagement and lots of things about men's health. And so I think this could be a really rich conversation around kind of norms as a whole and how do we look at shifting them and really catalyzing some of that trajectory that Heather presented about the timeline of adoption and the kind of curves of new product innovations that are so important. Yeah, and good point on that is what world vasectomy hangs on is this social norms shift. Yes, I know we're almost out of time. So there's a couple questions in the chat. I hope our MCI colleagues, et cetera, can maybe just respond to some of the smaller ones or the shorter ones. I did want to leave a moment to at least remind folks that, today we're convened under the new and underused reproductive health technologies caucus of the RHSC. And this is a group, if you're not part of it, we really welcome you to engage in our proceedings. We meet quarterly, but with some other meetings in between and certainly working on other initiatives in between. And this caucus is really about expanding the supply of new and underutilized technologies through the public, private sector, and social marketing in ways that
are equitable and meet the population's needs. And so male contraception is, of course, one piece of that, because it's one of those places where they are underused. We don't have a lot of products out there. We're really trying to really bolster the range and diversity of reproductive health supplies and technologies that are available to folks. So if you have any questions on how to become part of that, please do reach out to Raina, who is the person from whom you received the invitation to be here today, and she can get you added. I'm going to say a big thank you to Heather, to Logan, and to Emily for your time today. I think it was super interesting. And in fact, if you're still on the line, folks, why don't you give us a quick, in the chat, tell us like something new you learned today. I think it's helpful for us to know what content really resonates, and yeah, and also reach out if you have questions. But if there's something new you learned today, feel free to type it in the chat. I know I learned a lot, even just having Logan, having you walk through kind of the buckets of how to think about the different mechanisms by which male contraception operates. That is really helpful. Yeah, and just general good updates on male methods in development. Yes. Oh gosh, we're getting lots more now. Awesome.
No, I'm totally in it's like all in the comments.
Exactly. Exactly. So I will, what I'll do is officially close this, but if you're still typing, we'll remain on for a minute or two and try to see what comes through. Thanks, Innocent. And thanks everyone so much for your time. I hope you have a great day.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you,
great.
Heather. Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you, Megan, Julie, Logan.
Oh, so many interesting comments. Estimated timelines.